Brought to you by...
Isolation can come in many forms: physical solitude, social distancing, psychological disconnect, and so many others. All of which keep us trapped with a feeling that we are completely and utterly alone. Most of us feel isolated in some way or another, and we find ways in which we can manage it. However, when an outside force threatens us, while we feel so incredibly cut off from the world around us and everyone in it, the fight for survival becomes all the more severe, as we have no hope of someone coming to save us from it. When we find ourselves so suddenly swept out of our element, whether it be by a sudden change in our company, a subtle shift in our daily routine, or a planned relocation to a new city and a new country, it can set us entirely on edge. This is the case with Julia in the Shudder original Watcher. As a serial killer stalks the city, Julia finds herself a stranger in a strange land, having just moved to Bucharest with her boyfriend. It isn't long before she begins to suspect that a stranger who watches her from the apartment across the way may be a local serial killer, decapitating women. Our introduction to our protagonist, Julia, is very telling of her character, placing her as a stranger in a strange land, a woman new to her surroundings, unfamiliar with the city. We see that she doesn't speak the local language, and seems captivated by the beauty of her new surroundings. Throughout the film, they never give us subtitles for any of the dialogue spoken around her. This is done by design, in order to create a distant feeling of isolation between Julia and everyone else, forcing her to rely on her husband to keep her in the loop and translate for her. This is a great place to start our protagonist, because it forces her to grow over the course of the narrative, which we see early on as she is attempting to learn the language with minimal success. Our opening credits are constructed with beautiful simplicity, consisting solely of a single dollying back shot from a large picture window, as the credits play over the frame. Our protagonist and her significant other are beginning to make love, as we watch voyeuristically, likely placing us into the eyes of the Watcher himself. While we do venture out into the world on occasion, the majority of the film takes place within the confined settings of this single apartment. The design of this setting is beautifully crafted in conjunction with the narrative that is set to unfold within its walls. Grand windows line the far wall of the apartment, creating the feeling that the apartment is merely a habitat that Julia is inhabiting, being watched by the ever-present Master. Each night, she gazes out one of these windows to find a strange man in the building across the way, staring out toward her from behind the veil of a curtain. Throughout this one, this theme of isolation is ever-present, even within the physical visual presentation. Within most frames of the film, Julia remains either the only one within the frame, or the only one that isn't lost in the depth of field. This creates a constant loneliness, and loneliness permeates this film. Julia is in a new city, a new country. Her husband Francis is often working late, pouring countless hours into his career. This often leaves her left at home, alone, and unprotected. You can imagine this would become terrifying when she learns that a serial killer is picking off women in the city. The hardest to swallow form of isolation that this film employs is the fact that she becomes more and more aware of the presence of this Watcher. No one around her believes that she's telling the truth. However, this is the element that causes her most prevalent character shift. When no one believes you or is willing to help you, you need to take matters into your own hands. In this case, she then begins to become a Watcher herself, choosing to follow the man watching her, in an effort to find out why he is doing this to her. Much of the film is presented within the darkness of Julia's apartment, which is fitting due to the feelings of isolation, making you feel like the light of the world shines on everyone but you. This is emphasized when she steps out into the hallway, or visits her neighbor's apartment, where a little more light is introduced. while their home remains clouded in shadow. Maika Monroe portrays this character in a similar way to how she portrays a lot of the roles that she has appeared in previously. Her meek, reserved acting style fits perfectly within the world of this narrative, and plays well with that isolated feeling that she is meant to portray. Our Watcher here is played by the always masterful Bern Gorman, whose presence on screen is always chilling, at least in most of the roles that I've seen him step into, which is always enjoyable because he is not the most imposing figure, but projects an unnerving vibe with such a delicate hand. This film utilizes framing incredibly well, setting up shots that both look incredible and showcase so much intended emotion. One scene I would like to draw attention to directly is the train sequence. This moment took me somewhat by surprise. Suddenly, we are met with this moment where Julia is forced to confront her Watcher directly, face to face. They exchange words, and the film suddenly presents us with another side to the story. A story of a sad, similarly lonely man living across the way, and a simple misunderstanding that flips the whole situation on its head. In this moment, I suddenly found myself taken aback, finding the narrative at a place where it would have honestly floored me. However, this shock was overtaken as the tension of the moment began to shift, and her attention is drawn to the plastic bag that he has at his side. The scene honestly shook me in its beautiful craftsmanship. It wisely took the moment to alleviate the tension of the situation, only to seconds later thrust us back into a horror so much more terrifying. This was a film designed to make you uncomfortable from the first frame to the last. It starts us off on uneven ground and keeps tilting the scales ever so subtly, until this moment on the train, where it topples them over with a violent confirmation of what we already believe to be true from the get-go. This is one that doesn't attempt to flip the script in its final moments, or provide any sort of bizarre twist. Instead, it delivers on a simple stalker story, and does so with a beautiful simplicity. Something I enjoyed quite a bit was the final moments of this film. As I said before, over the course of the story, Julia herself winds up in many ways becoming as much of a Watcher as the Watcher himself. And throughout this experience, Julia's boyfriend is painted as someone who places ration above all else. He doesn't believe her when she comes to him for help, and ultimately turns against her in her most desperate hour. He refuses to see what is happening right in front of him. So in the end, as he exits his apartment, and sees the man she accused of being the Watcher inadvertently revealing himself to him, he is forced to watch as he is gunned down in cold blood, in some ways making him a witness to the final act of violence. One could say, a Watcher to some degree. Hey friends, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help support this channel and ensure future content like this, please consider supporting ETF over on Patreon. Every little bit helps this channel grow, and I'd love to turn this content into something that I create for you full time. Imagine how many videos I'd be able to bring you. Until next time, stay safe, and keep embracing film.